Halibu is a place for the last 3 years where a lot of good things are happening. And I say that compared to the previous 3 years under a different leadership and a different council that we've had. A lot of work has been happening and will continue to happen in many, many areas. In the area of culture, for example, and I think there was a survey done a few years back, and people were asked, what's important to you? Culture was number one. And I think culturally we've come a long way in the last few years. I want to say this, though, that culture isn't entirely driven by Halibu First Nation in itself. Halibu's primary role is to support cultural initiatives in your communities, either directly through Halibu and the Council or through the Cultural Foundation. But it's the communities that are doing a lot of good work with respect to cultural initiatives. It's happening big here in Flat Bay, in St. George's, in Corner Brook, other communities. We're seeing it happening now in Burgeo. I was there this summer for a Burgeo Coloring Cultural Mawiomi. Some of you were also there. Calvin was there and others. So things are happening in the community. So Halibu's principal role in all that is to support those events, those initiatives financially, with resources, and yes, with our direct participation by going there in our communities with you to take an active role in what's happening. We continue to support the Flat Bay Powwow. For me, that's become a regional powwow, and I know Halibu doesn't own that powwow. It's owned by the Bay St. George Cultural Revival Committee, and most people would say when they say, where are you going? They say, I'm going to the Flat Bay Powwow. They don't say, I'm going to the Bay St. George Powwow. That event has been helped through us. Prior to my time, there wasn't a lot being given to that powwow. I think in the last 3 years directly, Halibu has provided $21,000 in direct cash. And yes, we did get some money from Emera through an agreement or memorandum of understanding, and that money went to the Cultural Foundation. And I carved $10,000 out of that money to be given to the Flat Bay Powwow. Going forward, I'll do whatever I can to try to support those initiatives. We'll always be here to support the Flat Bay Powwow. We supported 2 Mawiomis in exploits. We supported the Mawiomi in Benoit's Cove 2 years ago, and yes, this year we supported Burgeo financially and also with many of us being there. And I do appreciate that these Mawiomis in some of these communities, when they're having a revival or interest in their culture, they need people to go there and help them. People like Calvin, people like Arlene White and others, Moochie Bennett, because we're trying to help these people because they're learning about their culture. And yes, even with their drumming, we help people, we have people that go there. So these are some of the things that we do, and we're going to keep doing this. Because one of the things that unites us in all of our communities, despite sometimes our differences of opinion, is what? It's our culture and cultural initiatives. We can all have a common ground and a common sense of spirit and belonging by all of us being involved in cultural initiatives. And this is where Halibu needs to be going forward in support. And my commitment to all of you and to this community, of course, is to be doing the same kind of thing, and hopefully we can continue this in a big way for other communities. Maybe some people are jealous in our communities that we give more to Flat Bay, but the Flat Bay Powwow was first. The Flat Bay Powwow, in the eyes of many people around our communities, is about a regional event, is not entirely about an event for the Bay St. George group in Flat Bay, because a lot of people come from a lot of places to do this. When we go to other smaller areas, we see, with the exception of people that help out and go there and support, it's mainly a small community of people from those communities. That's how the Flat Bay Powwow is different. It's 11 years this year gone. It's a great event. So I'll stop on culture. I'd like to talk a bit about our youth. There was a time in Halibu First Nation when we weren't paying to our youth at all, giving them very little, doing very little. But now we're doing lots of different things for our youth, from seminars to workshops to taking people to Kill Devil Lodge. Every year we put 2,200 students, usually from grade 5, from one end of the province to central, mostly central and western, and chaperones and parents, 2,200. It's a great camp, a lot of cultural initiatives being talked about. This year again we were involved with the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary in a camp for what the RNC calls underprivileged children. I hate to use that term, but yes, maybe these children wouldn't get to go to a camp for 4 days in Kill Devil because their parents couldn't afford to do it or get them there. So we're partnering with that group in there. And many things that are going on, from Dancers of the New Dawn, the Black Bear program, and many of you probably don't know much about that program, but I had a commitment from the Army this year, from the Canadian Armed Forces, to bring 50 students, youth, actually youth and up to 40 years old, believe it or not. Send them to New Brunswick, to Camp Gagetown for 6 weeks for a pay of $4,200. And we send people all over the province with recruiters and from Halibu. I had 50 seats, and I got 4 students. 4 youth went. You got to be 16 years old in grade 10. What an exciting project for students or young people in Flat Bay. And you don't have to be that young, by the way. There's a very strong cultural element there. It's not just about going to the military and learning how to shoot a rifle, how to march, but there's a strong cultural element. I want 40 people next year, and the year after maybe we'll get 60. This is a good program. I have a commitment from the Canadian Army because I sat at breakfast with a general named Paul Winnick, and I said, General, we've never sent anybody to Blackberry before. If I get 50 students, can I send 50? He said, yes, I'll find the money somewhere. We got 4. But it's a start. Next year, maybe 24, and the year after 44. And that's how these things go. So there's a lot of work we need to be doing with our youth. I was in Grandeur the other night, and I met a lady. This is a whole different area about youth. She said, I got a problem, Chief Mitchell. She said, I got a son. He's causing a lot of trouble for us at home. He said he's on the drugs all the time, and she actually said, he's on the needles. He said he's got our family tore apart. What am I going to do? We have a lot more work to do with our youth in those areas. A wellness center is one. I mean, we don't have a wellness center. I know what's been talked about here, and I sat in on a meeting about maybe a year and a half ago with Moochie Bennett and a couple of others from the Corner Brook area talking about a wellness center. Well, I actually went to Indian Brook because I wanted to see what it was like. They have 7 rooms there, and they have a sweat lodge, and they have people with trouble with drugs and other issues, and they finally get them back on track. So there's lots of things we could be doing yet for our youth. But we are working on youth programs. Our elderly. There hasn't been a lot going on with elderly, but there was a program this year called Elder Face. 250 seniors took part in a program whereby they talked about health authorities, victim services, violence prevention. I hear there's elder abuse going on too in homes and families. And the RCMP was involved in Seniors Newfoundland. But out of that came a group that have knowledge now about these issues, and they've committed to be in their own communities talking about issues related to elders and elderly. I had a meeting recently with a lady in Stephenville and said, what are we doing for our elderly by way of housing? She knew a lady, 84 years old, with her step broke, member of Halibu First Nation. We need to find programs to fix those things up. Housing was left off the table in the original agreement in principle. Housing repairs. The FNI had programs in the old days. I know that because I worked as one of them, as an employee of an FNI program with Bob Webb, Joe Webb, and Duke Kennedy going around one fall, putting windows in people's houses and fixing their bridge and trying to do what we could for them. That's in the early 1970s. So I know how important people valued those programs. I met a woman when I was running for chief 3 years ago. I was over in Cox's Cove. She says, when am I getting my windows and my new roof? I said, ma'am, I'm sorry, we don't have those programs anymore. But we've got to find a way to get that stuff back on the table. On the 29th of October, I'm going to Vancouver in a conference with the Assembly of First Nation to try to find a way forward on a housing program. We need housing, we need repairs. We may be able to find some money, though, when I get the new council in, maybe to put a pot of money together to fix the lady's step that we talked about. Small things. We're not going to be able to shingle your roof, but maybe we can find someone to do these little jobs and we can put a pot of money aside. Facilities is another area we've done more than we've ever done. We now own the Stephenville Mall, mini mall on Main Street in Stephenville. We have a building in Grand Falls during my term. We have a community room now in Grand Falls for the first time. And yes, we have a community room in Corner Brook that has become our council chambers. And we'll keep looking for opportunities in those areas to do more and more. Not everybody has the beautiful community room that you have. Many of our communities don't have a lot. And if we go there, we have to go in and rent a place belonging to the Lions Club or the 50 plus club and those types of things. But you have a beautiful facility right in your community. I think Keith came into today for the first time. It's a beautiful room, as we can tell. I can't say much more about it. It's clean, it's large enough. You even got a bandstand and have a dance, and you got dartboards for community events today. I think it's a dart tournament today. So these are the things that people need to be doing. We're doing more and more than we ever did in terms of that, and it'll continue. Education and training, very quickly. $6.1 million we spend every year on upgrading the education of our young people and giving them a better chance to improve their lives and that of their families. I really like education. In 1975, Grenfell campus opened in Corner Brook, and I was able to go to university. I say to somebody the other night in the joking, I said, if I never went to university, I probably would have ended up in Toronto or in jail. But anyway, Grenfell was a saving grace for me, and fortunately I was able to earn a Bachelor of Science degree and a Master's degree in Business Administration. I had no funding from anybody else. My father didn't fund me either because he never had any money. But we're trying to make it easier for our young people and their families to enable our young people to go to post-secondary. And it's not always about university. It's about becoming a pipe fitter, or a welder, or a heavy equipment mechanic, whatever it is. And teacher, yes, doctor, and yes, and lawyers. And these are the things that we're doing. 4 years ago, we had 443 students being funded by Halibu. This year, we have 888. One of the things that I am going to go after, though, as your chief, is parity with other First Nations organizations, because our head count is really big compared to them. And many of them are getting as much as we are, and sometimes more. So now we have a program whereby we take care of books and tuition, and we allow our students to get $1,000 in this semester and another $1,000 in the next semester to help them with expenses. One of the things I came to find out, though, about our program, we have to start thinking about this, and we do have an education committee. To my surprise and disappointment, I still hear that the students and their parents have the upfront monies for books and things like that, and then you get the money, get the stuff from us after. That's not what we need to be doing. We need to make it as easy as possible for our people to go to school. You may not know this either, but we support 888 students in our own system, but we also manage or administer the education system for the Northwest Territories. I don't know if you even knew that, most of you. We're trying to take and expand these programs, and yes, if we can take it over for some other province of Canada, we'll do that too. So that's an important area, and we're going to be doing more and more. We just signed a memorandum of understanding with CONA, College of the North Atlantic. It's a program whereby we're trying to better tailor programs to meet the needs of our members. We signed up for 5 years. It didn't cost us anything to do that, but we're going to be working with CONA to try to develop a better programming system that better meets the needs of our people, and that's just a thing we're doing. And of course, Grenfell campus has an advisory board, a vice president's advisory board, and I sit on that board on behalf of Halibu First Nation. I can go on a lot about education and training health programs. We spend $11 million a year on health programs, drugs, eye care, dental, medical. We're this fall taking over the mental health aspect of Health Canada's program ourselves for the first time. We're administering it ourselves now. But there's lots of areas to be improved on. I mentioned earlier, a wellness center for sure. Areas of drug and alcohol abuse. I'm really nervous, by the way, and I'll tell you this about this recent cannabis thing. I was at Dominion the other night there when it opened up the first day, and the place was packed. And I said, I didn't realize it was going on. I said, well, what's all this about? Hey man, he said, we're selling cannabis. Some guy about 20 said that to me. There were a lot of people there. I'm concerned about that. You know, a lot of our First Nations band are getting involved in cannabis too. They see it as a way to make a lot of money. And I'm okay with making a lot of money because that's the way we get money to do what? To pay it forward into our communities. Another thing that this grant, or this agreement in principle never had, was core funding for our communities. I've been hearing this from a number of people and some of you. When that agreement was put in place, people had a feeling there was an umbrella that everybody was going to fall under, and there would be some allowances for money for our communities. It was left off the table. You know, a lot was left off the table. Fishing and hunting, money for our youth, money for our elderly, money for culture. And yes, I'll say this, maybe that agreement should have said, under no circumstances should a founding member of Halibu ever lose their status for any reason. That was left out of that agreement and should have been in there. We wouldn't have the trouble and the emotional and the distress and real stress. I just talked about a medical program on drugs. Our drug programs, getting your pills. People don't have to make a decision anymore. Should I buy bread or milk, or should I buy blood pressure pills or diabetes pills? We fixed that. But that privilege has been lost now to some people. And some of those people would find it very difficult to find a replacement program. Maybe their health situations have changed. Maybe they're diabetics today. Maybe they have cancer. Who is going to insure these people? Maybe they're 65 and 68 and 70 or 80 today. Very hard to get a drug program there. So we are still struggling with government saying you have to take care of hardship cases in this process because people are hurting. I get a lot of these calls about people who have drug programs, they're expensive, and now they're gone. It's a shame that happened. We'll talk more about that in a minute, I would believe. So those are some of the things we're doing on the health side of things. Relationship building. I am a relationship builder. And I want to improve the relationship that's happened between us here in Flat Bay and the rest of our communities. That's an important initiative for us going forward. We've got to get back our unity. Someone posed a question the other night in Stephenville. How are you going to bring unity back into our communities? First of all, we have to decide we need to be united. We have to talk and sit, and we have to work at our issues, and we have to start doing more things, and we have to get people, and some may not like what I say here, we have to get people off Facebook. All over this country, there are negative comments made about us, and we're making them, by the way, among ourselves, all across our communities, from here to Central and St. John's. We're making communities ourselves, and people are watching. There's no wonder people call us illegitimate, fake Indians. And it's bad enough for non-Indigenous people to be saying that about us, but we're doing it to ourselves among all of our communities. That has to change. It really does. If we're going to get unity, we have to stick together. You may want to talk to me today about your conversations a while back on separation or a division of membership. I'm not here to hold back anybody that wants to move forward in that regard, because the Indian Act has provisions for doing that. So we need to get back together, though, about this. I'll give you an example of something that happened. I got an email from a guy early in the spring telling me about his friend went to the Six Nations Reserve in Brantford, Ontario to get gas. And he went into the gas station and showed his card, and buddy said, "You're in the fake Indian band from Newfoundland." He said, "Get out of here. We need to fix this." So across this country, people are paying attention to what people are saying, and they're paying attention to what we're saying about each other, and it has to stop. We got to get better than that. We had a very incredible moment on St. Anne's Day on July 26th this summer in Vancouver. We became members of the Assembly of First Nation. That didn't happen overnight. It happened because we took the time, first of all, to be supported by Flat Bay and your proxy, and supported by Chief Joe and Corey John and Con River on behalf of the Glenwood Band. Hallelujah First Nation now is a member of the Assembly of First Nation. We're finally taking our rightful place alongside other First Nations in this country. My view is the Assembly of First Nations is the most powerful Indigenous organization in North America. That was a proud moment for all of us, and a proud moment for our own sense of reconciliation, to be accepted and acknowledged by 634 chiefs and communities in this country. They never acknowledged us very well before at Hallelujah. They did acknowledge Flat Bay in 2002. They acknowledged Con River, and they acknowledged Glenwood at some point. But we needed that to happen. We were members of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, an organization representing non-status Indians and Métis, and an organization, truthfully, that's struggling today for a sense of belonging alongside of other First Nations. I think the Daniels decision from 2016 will eventually lead the Congress of Aboriginal People into a place of obtaining First Nation status, but that's down the road yet. So for us to go there and be accepted is great. Another aspect of relationship building I want to talk to you about very briefly is the Atlantic Policy Congress and the Grand Council. I went there last February and I spoke on my feet for 2 hours and 15 minutes, taking a lot of hard questions about those people from those chiefs, saying to me, "Chief Mitchell, you're 103,000 people. How do you explain that to all of us?" And I said, "Listen, everyone, we're not 103,000 people. Our band at that point was 23,877. Of course, when the decree came down a little while ago, we ended up being 18,575. And now we're back to 22,229. Sadly, though, 10,000 members thereabouts came out of the founding members list. 2,762 came back. So the net impact is we're a band above 22,000. So the Atlantic Policy Congress wasn't ready for us yet, and wasn't ready for me. I did the best I could to explain who I was, about our communities. And they said to me, "We're not ready for you yet." Because, you know, I came home not disheartened, Because you don't get married on your first date, do you? You got to build up a relationship and a trust. And it takes a while before someone finally gets up the heart and the courage to pop the question, will you marry me? So I'm going back there in the fall because they committed to take me back there to have a conversation about Halibu. I think they'll be more ready to accept us this time. I've had some private meetings with some of the chiefs in Nova Scotia, and they tell me we're there. Last Saturday in Cornwall, there was a pipe ceremony conducted by Stephen Augustine. Stephen is a hereditary chief, born in New Brunswick, now vice president of Cape Breton University and president of Unamega College in Nova Scotia. He performed a pipe ceremony, and it was a very emotional event, actually, because he apologized to Halibu First Nation on behalf of the Grand Council. He's a member of the Grand Council. That was quite a moment, and he's committed to work with us to try to find our way back into making a proper connection with the chiefs of Nova Scotia. And it hasn't been easy because they're looking at us with skepticism. And they were slighted a few years ago when Halibu formed, saying, you never talked to us. You never consulted with us, and we know who the Indigenous people of Atlantic Canada are, and yes, we can tell you about Newfoundland Mi'kmaq. They got upset, and we've been feeling it ever since. So I'm interested in making a relationship with those organizations. Yes, that takes going to Chapel Island on Pentecost Sunday to meet with the Grand Council directly, and hopefully with the help of some elders from our communities, maybe we'll make an inroad back into the Grand Council. Chief Joe was a member of the Grand Council. So we got some people now wanting to help us. So this is something we're doing, relationships with government, and they're at many levels. Of course, you have to have a relationship with municipal governments, you need a relationship with the province, and for the first time, we have a premier who's listening to us. Dwight Ball is also Minister of Indigenous Affairs in this province, in Newfoundland and Labrador. He has a Premier's Round Table. You've been there. Others have been there. We had it this year also in Cornwall, Neck Chairs, and Labrador, and we'll be there. No Premier, Danny Williams, Joe Smallwood for sure, Clyde Wells, any of these people ever envisioned sitting down with us as Indigenous people in Newfoundland and Labrador and hearing what we had to say and offering to give us a hand in issues that we face. So this is important. We have Aubrey Gober as Deputy Minister. Incredible guy. I love that guy. He's so helpful and thoughtful. Yes, and I've seen him pretty emotional in ceremony also and moved by what was being done and was said. And for the first time in our province's history, we have an Assistant Deputy Minister in Judy White, one of our own Assistant Deputy Minister. Dwight Ball gets it, and we're going to do more and more. Federally, our relationship hasn't been really great. I mean, our programs are okay. We got more to do in programming. We got more to get. We got more to recover. But my meetings with Carolyn Bennett haven't been very solid. I met with her 7 times, just for the record. I've had meetings with Jody Wilson-Raybould, the Minister of Justice. I met with Seamus O'Regan on the 30th of August with some veterans, trying to find a way for veterans back into the system. And it wasn't just about veterans, it was about everybody. I've had meetings with Romeo Saganash, the opposition leader for the NDP party. I met with the opposition critic for the Conservatives. And yes, I've had a conversation with Elizabeth May. I met with the Assembly of First Nations. I met with the Calgary Aboriginal people, and they participated in a demonstration that I helped lead in Ottawa last February on Parliament Hill. I've had meetings with Premier Ball, Eddie Joyce, Jerry Byrne, Chris Mitchell-Moore. I met with the entire Liberal caucus last December in a meeting in Ottawa. And yes, I've also met with some of these people in support of the Flat Bay Band and the Flat Bay community. These are some of the things that I'll do and I'll keep on doing because it's the way we need to be working to build relationships with these people who we need at some point to help move our communities and Halibu First Nation forward. Business development. We don't have core funding, as I stated earlier, for our communities. We get money for administration and health, education, and we make a bit of money on our own business interests, whether it's in real estate or the fishing boat that we all own called the Navigator. We have 15 fishing licenses, the majority of which we give to our members to fish for a very, very low fee. So we're not, we're trying to help our members earn a proper living, feel good about their employment, and do something positive for their families. We're trying to expand to an urban reserve, get a piece of land. Corner Brook was the first community to be receptive to that. Stephenville wasn't, by the way, just for the record. Gander wasn't that much either at the time. But Stephenville is very interested now with Tom Rose there, but we're on the road into that conversation. We're expecting very soon to have some funds come in to help us get organized through a piece of land. We're looking at 57 acres of land just on the Corner Brook side of Watson's Pond and almost across from the new hospital location in Corner Brook. It will be a great location for us. And of course we had to have satellites. And a satellite can be as small as a gas bar. Really, I'm telling you. There are many communities in Nova Scotia, for example, that have a reserve with no one living on it. There's a gas bar in a convenience store on a piece of land that someone says, yep, this is a satellite, or what they call addition to reserve. I'd like to do it in many places. And you know, it's easy, if we have a right to do this, to find monies to put into projects like a gas bar, convenience store. But we have to be prepared to get into a bit of debt financing. We have a council, I got to tell you, that's very, very nervous about debt. They want to buy everything with cash. Large projects, if you've been to Member 2, if you've been to Eskazoni, if you've been to Millbrook, those aren't happening with small amounts of money. They have to borrow this money somewhere, usually, and we're going to be doing this. But we're going to do it because we're all going to be involved in it together. So we have to do something for ourselves by way of economic development. And by the way, the minister supports it. We're going to help you. I was in a meeting with Carolyn Bennett a while back, and we were talking about urban reserve. They gave me the old landless band deal first, you know. I'll tell you that story. Gave me a letter saying, well, realize you have a landless band. I said, hold on a second. There's always been a provision in that agreement for us to do something by way of economic development. And Carolyn Bennett said to Chris McDonnell, who was a regional director in Amherst, he said, Chris, work with Brendan to see what you can do on an urban reserve. They gave me a member on our committee. We have a representative of INAC on our committee, together with Brian Harvey from Newfoundland government. We have the city of Corner Brook, ourselves. We've lined up a consultant named Jerry Kerr, who's done this many times. So we've had a few meetings on this. But you know, this is not an overnight project. Do you think if you go to Member 2 and you see a hotel and Tim Hortons and a big theater or a couple of places and gas bars, do you think they got that in a year? It takes a while to get that stuff. So these are the things we need to be doing to help our own communities do better and get something. And yes, Brendan Mitchell and Halibu First Nation will be here to help Flat Bay and any other community that wants to take one of those projects on. Because that is what a chief does. And that's what a council is supposed to do. And we're here to help you, honestly. And we'll get there. We put the Halibu Development Corporation back in place. Keith was the chair. He backed off because he's running for Western Vice Chief. So he had to take a term break from that. And if he's elected as Vice Chief, he'll be out of that role. If he's not elected, he'll go back as chairperson of the Halibu Development Corporation. So these are some of the things we're doing in those areas. We have a much better relationship right now, though, with Indigenous communities, like Conn River. There was a broken relationship in Conn River. Did you know that? It wasn't a good relationship with the previous leadership in Conn River. We're back. I talked to Chief Joe 2 or 3 times a week. We spoke last night. There's a lot we need to be doing together. We just signed an MOU with Conn River and Mabubek First Nation and Innu Nation. That never happened before in our time. We're going after Arctic Surf Clan. The deal got messed up. I think it was Dominic LeBlanc who got into a bit of trouble over it. The Conn River Band actually made a follow lawsuit against Canada in that regard. But in 2019, someone's going to get a license for Arctic Surf Clan, and we're going to be partnering with those guys. The redfish business is really important to us also. We want to get a redfish quota, not for Halibu and Corner Brook by itself. It's for all of us. So that license or quota is going to allow us to do a lot of important things with Bill Barry, who's committed to put $20 million into a fish plant in Benwas Cove. And I got to be honest with you, I haven't got them lined up knocking at the door trying to give us a $20 million fish plant and 200 full-time jobs, plus jobs in Burgeo, plus jobs in Port aux Basques, when those places are expanded and improved. This is a good project, and we've got lots of ideas on a vision for a project in Benwas Cove. Just on the redfish processing alone, the way the deal is shaping up is this: if we get the license, we're going to get a commission. We'll get a commission on every pound of redfish that's processed. And you know what we're going to do with that money? We're going to give it here, and we're going to give it in Gander Bay, and we're going to put it in Grand Falls, and we'll put it in Corner Brook and Benwas Cove, because we're not in the business of rounding up a whole pot of money and seeing how much we can get in our bank account. We're trying to get funds enough so we can give our members something in their communities. And that's what these economic development projects are geared to do. So more and more we're going to be doing these types of things. And there are lots of great initiatives going around, I can tell you. Respect for the environment. We're all stewards of the environment as Indigenous people. We have to protect the environment. I stood strongly by the people in Port-au-Port when they were in the fracking problem 2 years ago. I spoke on their behalf to the 5-member panel and went back to Port-au-Port and spoke strongly there. I participated, about 90 of us, in an event called Praying Up on the Water to try to get that oil well down in Shoal Point capped off. Yes, I'm okay with projects that have a strong environmental consciousness, but I'm not interested in projects that have a strong environmental disregard. That's not what we do as Indigenous people. The last 3 years have been kind of bittersweet. There's a lot of nice initiatives going ahead. The enrollment process, though, has been a real sad situation and a nasty situation involving our people and me personally. And I hear people during this election going on with absolutely no platform, trying to pound me over the head every day based on some email that Annie Randall said, a while back. An email that, for me, was pure vindictiveness and unnecessary. I think she actually wrote an email in response to something that was said at this community, so she provided a counterattack that became a final shot at Brendan Mitchell. We have one of the candidates in this election using that email, actually reading it out on television as a platform. Brendan Mitchell saved himself. I want to talk to you about that in a moment. The same individual whose platform is, we're going to have a forensic audit at Halibu. A forensic audit for Halibu would cost over $100,000. And we're an organization with a full-time accountant, a chartered accountant on staff, a really good and strong finance committee, and an organization for 3 years in a row on INEX risk assessment among 634 bands in Canada, scored the best score in the country for 3 years, and this past year scored 1.51 on a scale of 0 to 60. No one has ever recorded that score. And I got people hanging a campaign on a forensic audit. Unbelievable, and they don't even know what it means. They have no idea what it costs. I have another candidate just recently that I heard on Facebook. He made a post at a request. I think it was one of the other camps said, "Are you proud to be a member of Halibu First Nation?" And the response was, "I'm proud to be Mi'kmaq, but I'm not proud to be a member of Halibu." That might be somebody's opinion. But for me, pardon me?
That's my quote, and I'll tell you straight up.
It wasn't you.
I can show you my...
Okay, we'll talk about that. And you can have that opinion, Bobby, and so can anybody else. But for me, I'm proud to be where I am as a member of Halibu First Nation, and I meet a lot of people who are really proud. Finally, to get recognition after all these years. Yes, proud to be a member of the Assembly of First Nations also. But I would never disrespect the people who for 50 years before me struggled to get recognition for this band. And what everybody thinks about recognition, we didn't get the best deal. So I have a problem with people who say that, okay? And if you're saying that, Bobby, yeah, I'm not happy about that, because we have a lot of people, including me, who are proud of where our people who brought us, the Warriors of the Flame and many others who kept it up. Yes, and even Brendan Shepherd, who never gave up the fight, got us a deal called recognition. I never liked the deal entirely, but here we are. And people say to me, I was in a meeting the other night, and a lady said to me, "Why don't you strike out at these people on Facebook?" That would be easy, wouldn't it, to go down there? I had a conversation with a very respected chief in this country about 2 weeks ago. And he said to me, we talked about Halibu, we talked about enrollment, and we talked about Facebook. And I'll tell you exactly what he said to me. He said, "Brendan, you are the chief of the largest individual Indian Act band in Canada." He said, "You're a chief." He said, "You're an eagle." And he said, "You have to be flying up here. Do not crawl down into the hate and disrespect of Facebook, because that is not what a chief does and shouldn't be doing." Do you know who told me that same conversation or similar last night about Facebook? Chief Mazel Joe, a man I respect dearly. He told me the same thing. This is why I can't get in on Facebook and get down to those people every day. People using false names and aliases, direct attacks on me and everybody else here, and a whole lot of other people. I can't go there. That's not what a chief should be doing. So you need to respect that. I could do it. I could write a story about the supplemental agreement that you'll get the clear picture. And when people say to me that I got involved in the supplemental agreement and I agreed to it in the end and sold everybody out, 3 things wrong with the supplemental agreement. I'll put my card down. Number 1, I'm going to clear the air right here. And I'm not going to get too contrary. The supplemental agreement was a document pieced together by 2 people on their own, without our council knowing it, with no input from our council, no involvement, no participation, and yes, no authorization by our council or the FNI and our people to go do it. And it came back in. I actually had Annie Randall in that letter refer to me as being savage. I didn't think anybody anymore would ever make a reference that an indigenous person in this province or country would be a savage, but anyway, it is what it is. However, number 2, that first round of the supplemental agreement that I spoke out about had a clause in there that became clause 8.3 of the final agreement, meaning that anybody who signed the document after September 22nd, 2011 had to go through all this other rigor, a lot harder rigor. In fact, the Wells case was won on the difference in treatment between those before 22nd September and those that came after. So I had a problem with that. The reason I had a problem with it because we had a lot of members in the band, about 8,000, who were going to be cleaned out when they were already members and go back now and do a self-ID. These people, a lot of them weren't in the FNI bands. They weren't on a band list. I know that. They couldn't meet the criteria. So Brendan Mitchell and the rest of the directors said, hey, what are you doing here? You're unprotecting. You're going to ruin this band. You're going to take out 8,000 people. The third problem I had was the point system. We were going to take out another bunch of people. We didn't know how many. Whether it be 500, 10,000, or 50, we didn't know. And Ben was there, and he'll tell you the same thing. We didn't know. But at the end of the day, when Brendan Mitchell, after 2 months of scrapping and fighting with Brendan Shepherd, he finally said, I guess we got no choice. And the other part of that choice was knowing that we were told by the lawyer and by the leadership at the time and by Canada that if the supplemental agreement didn't go through, our band and our whole program and our entity could be jeopardized. Do you think we had any support anywhere else in the country from anybody else in terms of all these people making an application? 103,000? And in the spirit of trying to give 78,000 people the chance to get in this band, reluctantly and finally, I had to say, well, what choice do we have? I guess we got to give these people a chance. It was never about Brendan Mitchell trying to protect himself on self-ID. Do you know why? Because I was around a long time ago, and I started a long time ago. I went to my first youth conference in Goose Bay when I was 18 years old, paid for by the FNI and sponsored by the FNI with Brendan Shepherd. Do you think I couldn't self-ID because of that alone? I worked for the FNI. So when people like Hayward Young are going around reading a letter allegedly written by Annie Randall saying that Brendan Mitchell protected himself, I can tell everybody here, and yes, anybody here, absolutely untrue. And Hayward Young is building a whole campaign on that issue only. I didn't need anybody to protect me. I know who I am, where I came from. I know my family. I know who knows me in this province, in Atlantic Canada. Yes, I know who knows me in the country. So for people to say that Brendan Mitchell couldn't self-ID and sign the supplemental agreement, which I didn't sign, I finally agreed to it, to protect himself is absolute bullshit and untrue. I have a letter from a lawyer who was involved that says that that note or that Facebook thing is foolishness. But yet we have a guy running in his campaign everywhere I go, and if he can't bring it up, somebody else does who's connected to him. I'm disappointed with all that. And this is a person that's being asked, he's asking you people and me to allow him to lead Halibu First Nation for the next 3 years. Wow. Anyway, I could go on and more here. I want to hear from Keith and hear from you. I'm sure you got lots of questions. But again, this election is about leadership. I've proven my leadership in the last 3 years, in the things I've done, the people I've helped. I'm not here to hurt anybody. I'm here to build communities up and help people in their communities come up. That's what Chief does. He upholds his people. The supplemental agreement was laid on us, unknown to us, and we end up having to deal with it. I come to believe, though, this day, that something was going to be done, whether you call it a supplemental agreement or agreement ABC. The government of Canada wasn't going to allow 103,000 people to be in this band. And I'm also hearing there are other jurisdictions, Indigenous jurisdictions, who didn't agree with it either. So something had to be done. But I think we just went too far this time, cut out way too many people, and yes, no one knew at the time how many people would go out on the point system, but we did know that about 8,000 people were going to come out on a self-ID program that they couldn't match, they couldn't get. So we take out 10,000, we take out another 8. What will we have left? We have a few people left in the band. Was that the intent that government had following 1949 when everybody was given nothing? Anyway, I'll stop there. If you got any questions about any of that, please let me know.
You sent an email to somebody saying that I was up there looking for affiliation for Flat Bay with the Congress of Aboriginal People,
yes,
and looking for money because Flat Bay was broke and they had no money.
Yeah.
Why would you do that without consulting with me first?
Thank you. Let me answer that, Calvin. That's what I was told, and that was told by to me and Keith Golding in a meeting on a conference call with Chief Robert Bertrand. So I was surprised, you know, because I remember you telling me not to be involved with CAP.
Exactly.
So you said to me, don't embarrass yourself going there.
Exactly.
So I was really surprised as to why you were there.
Well, I was invited there by a number of lawyers who were really good friends of mine,
yeah,
who's really concerned about so many people who have false documentation, false identification right across this country, and people who are joining the other provinces with a membership card that they buy or holding their hand up. And the lawyers are saying, and this is a conversation I had with some of those lawyers who are really good friends of mine, by the way, they're saying, unless we can get CAP to realize that there has to be some legitimacy to their membership, we're never going to get the government to sit down with us. And Newfoundland was going to be part of that problem.
Yep.
Because Dave Wells and his 75,000 people, you recommended that they be part of CAP.
I spoke to Robert Bertrand, and Dave Wells had a meeting with him, yes, and I'm not recommending anybody.
Okay, but well, I'm going to tell you.
And Robert Bertrand told me that he has to decide that.
The lawyer said to me, we want you to shoot this across the bow, because CAP affiliates have to know that in order to negotiate or in order to go to court, well, they're not going to go to court because they've already negotiated that and went through court, but in order to be legitimate, you really have to make sure that people have their documentation and that's why I went to CAP. Not to look for affiliation or to look
that's
for...
That's what I was told.
Verbatim of my discussions that I gave there. So that's my concern. But the other concern that I would have had is that, what are you doing about the people that are not legitimate, that belong to this band?
Which people is that, Calvin, that are legitimate?
You talked about when you were traveling around to every community, including Flat Bay, you and Odell and Randy Grover. You told us you met a woman in Corner Brook that you knew wasn't Indian, but she had her card. You told that in every community.
No, Calvin, you're mistaken.
You didn't say that?
No, sir. I told you I met a woman who never got in the band, and she tried because she said she wasn't an Indian. And I said, well, why did you apply? I said, you're one of the people that created a lot of problems for our people. That's what I said, Calvin. Sorry.
So you don't know of anybody in the band who's not legitimate?
All I can tell you is this, that there was a process with the Government of Canada and with a group from the FNI looking at genealogy.
Right.
That's what I know.
Okay.
And these people have verified these genealogies and these lines. That's not my, you know, Calvin, this is an exercise that went on. I'll share this with you. I was in a meeting in Gander the other day, and Hayward Young showed up there. I'll mention his name here. And stated to me that if he gets elected chief, he'd have an inquiry about a line called the Prosper Companion line, I believe it was. There's a bunch of stuff on Facebook about it, someone told me. And I said, well, Calvin, or Hayward, you know, I don't know why would you do that, because these people went through a process. But I will tell you this, all of you, that that issue came up in a Senate hearing. Someone actually from New Brunswick raised that issue at a Senate hearing about a line called Prosper Companion. It came up to one of my IC meetings also in Ottawa, and Canada said, look, we had a process and we had a legitimate team of people who viewed ancestry And he said, this conversation's over.
Well, that's good. I'm not concerned with that. But I am concerned, and I want to know, and so you're telling me that Bert Rand told you that
He told, yes, sir.
To the meeting and requested affiliation?
Yes, sir. Keith Golding and I were in the meeting. He told me that you called them up there looking to have affiliation. I was so shocked by it. I was so shocked by it, Calvin. Because I said, here's a man who's been encouraging me not to go there. They're already in a place where I'd love to be at the time. I said, I'd love to be. We just finally got where we are with the Assembly First Nations, and I was shocked to find out that you were at CAP and made representation about Flat Bay Band joining CAP. I said, I couldn't figure it out.
And I'll send you a verbatim of my discussions up there.
Thank you, Calvin.
I talked about joining CAP. What I did was I warned them about the possibility of not legitimizing their documentation because they will run in problem in trying to deal with the government. And the lawyers know that. The lawyers for CAP are very much aware of that. Because right now, anybody can join CAP. You don't have to be an Indian, you don't have to live in an Indian community, you don't have to have anything to do with Indians. All you got to do is put a little group of people together and call CAP and say, we'd like to join, and they will take you. Maybe not anymore. Maybe not anymore after that meeting that I was just doing. Because the shot was fired across the bow, and they have been notified because their lawyers can't do anything with them. Half of them just don't want to listen. Half of them just have, come on, pay your fee. Join the organization, that's good enough. No documentation to substantiate that you're in. And that is an issue, that is a problem. That's not only a problem up there, it's a problem everywhere.
We're on the cusp of elections, and you're speaking about wanting to build a relationship with Flat Bay, which we appreciate and we want to do. But this is what we went through with the former leadership all the time. It was a question about arms, for example. We were small-minded, we weren't allowed to ask, it didn't matter until elections came up and all of a sudden they wanted to talk about it. Urban reserves, I really don't buy it all that Porter Brook was the first to come up to want an urban reserve. Last January, this was December and January, Tom Rose was already willing to give 50 acres of land in Steveville for an urban reserve, and he was willing to come out and speak on that. And I believe there was a public meeting or something he was going to attend, which never happened then after that. We're not saying that Porter Brook isn't a place for an urban reserve, but we were never surveyed and asked. When I did some inquiries just on my own to chiefs to speak, to their communities, some people said urban reserve in Flat Bay. I didn't even agree with that. But I do think Steveville would be the spot. And when I look at Burgeo, for example, I inquired down there, and Burgeo basically said that they shop mostly in Steveville. So in looking at all of that, you look at McKay's going to Steveville is the same as Benoit's Cove coming to Steveville, that kind of a thing.
Brendan Shepherd and Annie Randall went and met with some communities, Gander, Grand Falls, Corner Brook, you were on council in Corner Brook at the time, Stephenville, and the only group who was interested in doing something was Corner Brook, and that's honest. Unfortunately, the prior mayor of Stephenville wasn't interested in this thing. In fact, I did hear that it had never happened while he was going to be around. So we have a new mayor, Tom Rose, and just for the record and clear the air, the mayor of Stephenville never offered Halibu First Nation 50 acres of land. I know they have land, but that was never done in any formal way. And I don't know if even Tom even mentioned that to me informally. And there was no letter ever sent to us saying, we're here to give you 50 acres of land. That never happened. I did have a lady one time who came to meet with me and Annie Randall looking at giving us 50 acres of land in Stephenville, privately owned by her. And a little while later, about 2 weeks later, she said the offer's off the table. And I won't get into why of that, but it had something to do with the previous mayor. So anyway, so that's about the urban reserve. Urban reserves are called urban because they're put in urban areas where urban reserves have their best chance. A lot of bands, though, have satellites, small little places, but somewhere they have a much larger reserve. And there's 53 of them in Saskatchewan alone, but 124 in Canada. 22 bands that are landless, and we were trying to get an opportunity to create some business development, and the minister supports it by putting an urban reserve. Truthfully, Corner Brook was the only larger community talked to that showed any interest in it. I actually met with the Chamber of Commerce of Gander myself, and they wrote me a letter 2 weeks ago, and they said, this is not for us right now. So Corner Brook continues to be interested. Tom Rose is now interested. And the plan would be, yes, to have a satellite in Stephenville. And that can be as big, eventually, as how we want to make it together with the community of Stephenville. So that's for sure, okay? The other opportunity was in Central and maybe Grand Falls because of the population base. So an urban reserve in the original guidance from government were created to give northern or remote communities a chance to do better for their community with business development that was made close to a larger urban center or action and business was going on. And that was the original concept of urban reserve. So what happens though, bands like reserve bands, they create what's called an addition to a reserve, and then you can set up a smaller satellite somewhere else. And maybe that satellite could start off smaller and become very bigger, you know, like the Stephenville situation. So we recognize, you know, people say, I heard us sit down at the meeting, you know, in Stephenville, you're so Corner Brook centric. That happened because the head office was set up there. If the office was in Flat Bay at Halibu, we'd be Flat Bay centric. If it was in Stephenville, we'd be Stephenville centric. That's just how it became. I don't know why the office is in Corner Brook, but it is in Corner Brook. Maybe it should have been here. Maybe it should have been in Stephenville. Maybe it should have been in Grand Falls. But this is how we became centric, because we set up an office in a region, Corner Brook.
We spoke to Tom today. He would be willing to give you land. And so my question to sum this up is, will you consider speaking to Tom and surveying the people about the urban reserve? That's my question.
Yes, thank you. We can do that, but I've already spoken to Tom, and I know Stephenville is open for business. He's already told me this, and we've had a number of conversations about urban reserve. In fact, I went out and spoke to the Chamber of Commerce, and I told him I'd come back any time to speak to the Chamber of Commerce again, and you privately on this issue.
I'll tell you how wide-ranging one of them. The Constitution of the Federation of Newfoundland Indians it specified in the Constitution that the office of the Federation would go in whatever community the chief was elected from, or at the discretion of the chief. And we did that to make sure that we wouldn't stop people, say, from Glenwood or Gander Bay or Grand Falls or Flat Bay or Robinsons or wherever there was Indian people. We wouldn't make it difficult for them to be able to run for office and run the association. So that was in the Constitution. When Brendan Shepherd got elected, he made the decision to leave in Corner, because it was also or at the chief's discretion. So it would either go in the community where the chief came from, or the chief could make the discretion of where he wanted the office. So if Brendan at the time had said, I'll put my office in Grand Falls, it would have went to Grand Falls, because we didn't want to disrupt families or to take people out of their communities and wouldn't wait only for 3 years.
Corner Brook area, surrounding Vivaz, at the time had 11,700 members when Halibu was formed. Half of the entire band was in the Corner Brook area.
What's that again?
Yeah.
At the time
when Halibu formed?
Not when Federation formed.
No, I'm talking about Halibu.
I had a hard time to get half this room full of people.
I know.
For the first 40 years.
Well, it's interesting. I could talk a bit about that, but I think what happened was the population of Corner Brook was extremely large, or the ward was 11,700 people. Maybe that prompted to put the office where most people were. In fact, by the way, I did read the 2002 regime, cover to cover, and at the time, the band size of 10 bands of the FNI in 2002 was 3,686 people.
All documented.
Very, very small.
All documented.
Yeah, anyway. And I think that got to 5,000 to 7,500 and around 10,000 for purposes of forming Halibu First Nation.
I'm surprised you're starting off the talk here without an apology.
Without an apology to Flat Bay.
Didn't you go on NTV and say that we were special? You were on NTV. That's documented.
And
said, and let me finish.
Go ahead.
That we think we're special.
That's right. I wrote you a letter on behalf of this community.
Right.
When you stated it, you didn't state it in a way that it was a positive. So when you come into this community, the first thing you should have done was apologize, because the state that you did state was not in a positive light. You're a friendship person. You want to do friendship. Well, I mean, I laughed when you said that, because I'm going to tell you, that really hurt the rest of us here in this community.
Okay.
When you said that, and I had a lot of people who comment. That's why I wrote you a letter. You never did respond to our letter. The letter was based from this community.
Okay.
Not just from me. I'm a leader in this community. People asked me to write it. And I wrote it. You didn't even respond.
Can I speak?
You can.
All right. That letter was read at a meeting in Stephenville. I was really taken back by the letter, because for me, it's never about hurting anybody here in this community. I've done a lot of good work trying to help your community, and I'll still do it. What I really would have liked to see was an apology to all of our people in Halibu, all of our members, on a national level about a conversation that happened on APTN television, in the media, whereby our membership was claimed, and our band was claimed to be illegitimate, false. Our band was illegitimate. People falsified documents in the Bay of Islands, and yes, it was stated on national television that we were an embarrassment and the most embarrassing First Nations band in this country. I'd like to have an apology nationally over that too, if I may say that to you.
Well, why did you say it?
Why did I?
Why did you have to put us in that realm? Why did you have to say that? Why couldn't you state it in the different...
Because your leadership, well, let me explain. Because listen, whether you like it or not, I wasn't pleased with that whole conversation that happened back then in the media. We were put down pretty badly. I have a lot of people in Bay of Islands who are upset, but my job as Chief of Halibu is to uphold all of our people. So I can't have anybody in the community saying we're illegitimate and we're an embarrassment as a band. If that happens again, you're going to hear from me, I can tell you, because that's my job to speak up for our people everywhere. It can't be about only here. It's got to be about all of our members. So you have to stop getting on Facebook and these places and putting our membership down. They don't feel they're any different from anybody else. We're all carrying the same status card. It's not different for anybody else. If that's not the case, I'm sorry about that. But I still would like to have an apology at a national level for people in this community putting us down in the way we put down Mi'kmaq people. And this is creating a problem for us all over the country, these kinds of comments. People are calling us fake Indians. We have to stop it. We really do.
Don't go around the bush.
Well, it's me.
Well, there are only two people on that television show. It was Liz and Calvin White.
There was a counselor who said to you, are you going to address the falsifications in your membership? And you said, that would affect like 3,000 of my people in Corner Brook. And you were quoted saying that a couple of times.
No,
To me, okay. That's me. I'm thinking maybe it could be 5 people in your membership. I still call it illegitimate if you're not going to turn your back on it, if you're going to turn your back on it. But if in your mind, when you say that affects 3,000 people, ish, and that's what you think, then why aren't you addressing those falsifications?
We went through a process. Government was fully aware, and I even mentioned a line here today that people are questioning. And all this stuff is coming out on Facebook. There are a few people saying this thing. I was in Benoit's Cove the other night and got into a conversation because people said on Facebook tonight they're telling us that some of the people here in Benoit's Cove aren't legitimate because of this particular line. I told you earlier, this came up at a Senate hearing in Ottawa. I know this because Steve May was there and he told me about it. I wasn't there. But a lady from New Brunswick raised this issue and it went nowhere. And Canada's view on it is we went through a process. We trusted a process we put in place with representatives from the FNI and the Government of Canada. And we were satisfied by that process. So why would I go back and get involved in that?
Are you saying that you have no issues with the process?
I'm saying that I have no issue with the process that was done to determine people's genealogy. And given that, and in the spirit of that, why would I want to go back and do an investigation on 3,000 people who someone in some community says these people, these 3,000 number, are illegitimate? Give me the proof.
Can you speak with that if it's even one? How can you be okay with that? I'm just asking you, are you okay with your membership? You feel that not one person is legitimate and it's not worth looking at?
I'm saying that I'm okay with the process that was taken in place between Canada and the FNI to prove the people's genealogy. And the Canada supports that right now, and so do I.
When you said we think we're special, it's the same connotation that you started off your speech with today when you said you made it a point to say all we give to Flat Bay, right? Let me finish.
We've been very helpful to Flat Bay, and Brendan Mitchell has, yes.
Flat Bay works for Flat Bay. We work for ourselves. You don't give us anything because it's your responsibility. It's your job. As a leader, as the Alapu Octopus of all of our bands, we work for it, and it's only your job to say okay and not prevent it. That's not a favor to us. That's not a gift. So the same connotation when you make a point like that, you're making a point as if Flat Bay thinks they're special, they get more, and the other people then, the other bands are looking at that and they're feeling like Flat Bay is getting special treatment or that we're thinking something else of the other communities. And that's where we get then going wrong with other bands. So I'm asking you to please just stop doing that, just be conscious of it, because it's like Joanne said, it does hurt us, it makes us feel bad, and it's not the point. You owe us to not prevent our movement, okay? So that's not a gift.
Chief Liz, I'm here to support Flat Bay, and I always have. I've spoken on behalf of you in government. I've met with ministers. I've been in Ottawa. I spoke in a meeting in Ottawa, and you were there, and Calvin was there, about the importance of helping your community. And I spoke very strongly to Carolyn Bennett. I've met with Goody Hutchings and other people in government trying to find a way forward for your community. And Calvin White finished and came over and he hugged me and he hit my hand. He said, you're the first person, he said, that ever spoke for us in that way.
I was proud of you.
Thank you very much. And I'll keep doing it. But understand this, guys. Every one of your community, you can tell your neighbors, if you continue to go out and say that people in our band and in Bay of Islands and these places are illegitimate, that is killing us across this country, and you can't do that.
You and I have had conversations. You even spoke in front of Aubrey Glover and the Deputy Minister.
Absolutely.
Right?
Trying to help you.
Yourself that people came up to you. You said this many times.
Please, don't put words in my mouth.
Well, no, I'm not. I'm saying what you said. You said, and you'll remember this, that people that came up to you and said, something about they were never Indian, they got their card and
No, I'm sorry. I did say that people came up to me who applied and said to me, I don't think I'm Indian, or they never knew they were, but they're hoping to get a card. And I say, why would you do that?
The community was owed an apology in a sense, and I think you could have done that, Chief. But at the same time, Liz, I would have to say that the other community members, from what I've seen, the other community members were upset at Flat Bay more because of how you were at the time with Facebook. And you've changed your ways on that, and I think you've learned from that. But the community, from my take on it, from hearing from different people, they weren't upset with Flat Bay because of Mitchell. They were upset with Flat Bay because of how you came across on Facebook. So I think an apology still could have went both ways.
But there are people who ask very, very genuine questions, and unless that's answered and clarified, what happens then, there's a whole other profile of people who think very rationally and unbiasedly, who get completely construed by everything that's being said. I was trying, to the best of my knowledge, to not be the chief who doesn't answer. I was trying to be the chief that does answer and does clarify. Then I found a profile of people that weren't looking for answers. They were only looking to cause trouble, and it just didn't help in the end. So that's where I went with that. That's why I changed my ways on Facebook. But there was nothing on Facebook that I was saying that I didn't believe in or I didn't think was clear. And if I said it in an appropriate way that upset somebody, I'm always the first to say I'm sorry for that. But for me, to this day, I can't apologize for saying that Alapoo's membership is legitimate, is illegitimate. I can't. If you can, when we all know the issues with the way the files were handled, the way the whole process went, nobody can go. I don't know how anybody can go to bed feeling that that's a pure membership.
You know, making statements like we all know. Maybe you know or think, but we all don't know. And I would encourage you to be careful with those kinds of statements. To Joanne, to Vice Chief Miles here, and to all of you, I was upset about that situation with people here speaking the way they did about our membership. It's my job to support our membership and uphold it, and I'll do the same to you. An apology is typically required when someone believes that they were hurt. Okay. For me personally, I didn't know that I needed to make an apology. But if that works for you, I'll extend my hand to you right now, Joanne, and to people in your community.
This was on behalf of the people, and then I had more than one call. I must have had probably about 12 calls, and that's why I wrote the letter.
We got to try to work a little better together because there's good work to be done. Look at the way I supported the Big Pond project. Do you think that was an easy sell? When I knew you needed that project, I had counselors who weren't really that interested in that project, but I said, no, this is a good project for Flat Bay. because I knew about it, because Calvin White and I drove to John Nickadore's funeral. On the way home, he told me all about Big Pond. When I looked at the pond, I said, holy shoot, what a chance to have experiential tourism and a nice project down in Big Pond. Keith and I looked at the work today. Beautiful job. I like what you got done so far. A lot more to do. Yes, and someday you need a motel. Yep, and you need a grocery store. Maybe other types of stores, and you definitely need a gas bar. If I have a community within our network, members of our band, that got a vision for those kinds of things and a willingness to do it, my job at Halibu First Nation, and you said it earlier, Chief, is to help you make it happen for you, and I'll do whatever I can to do that.
How much are you getting the last 3 years how much are you getting from Emera a year?
Nothing. Not anymore. That's over.
Okay, how much were you getting?
Yeah, that was $200,000 a year. And you know what we did?
That was about 3 years.
Yeah,
right?
you know what we did with the money?
Yeah.
Yeah, we hired people and created jobs at Halibu.
This is my issue, and it's something we can talk about more, okay? When you get funds for a community, that money is really remedial for a community. It's the company's way of taking responsibility in the community, and if they've done damage, they cut down trees, they cut down all our berries on Drillers Road, for example. You're landless, the corporation, and you already get an economic development budget from MINAC, okay? I don't get any money, Jason doesn't get any money, Indian Head doesn't get any money. They're affecting our community physically, okay? I know that you want to put some money aside for the urban reserve and economic development, I know that. But that may not be liberty that you have. When you have all of these incorporations, myself, Jason, like that, in communities where this is being affected. Jason wants to build a child center. I'm trying to finish Big Pond. That's our money, you know. It is our money, and that is really what a band council does. So I don't know if you're ever going to buy this or if you're going to really understand it. I hope you come to understand it in time. And I know you said earlier that you're going to try to get money for us down the road.
Exactly.
But if you only got a little bit, that doesn't mean it's just for you. It's for us. It's our money, and we know our people. When I called you elementary that time and you got upset, I'm sorry. But what I meant by that, your elementary, I think that was I could call you primary, elementary in knowing our needs, and you'll never be able to know our needs. That's my job as a chief and our council to know the needs of our people, okay? And to know how to administer that into the community. We don't want a corporation that tells us what we need and administers it for us to a degree, except for maybe health and education and those things. But culture and community development, that's our job. So that money belongs to us too, so that we can meet the needs of our people.
Chief, I was wondering about the mail-in ballots that's everybody is missing, because by the time they're going to get their ballots, it's going to be to the point that they can't even vote.
I had a meeting with the committee 3 weeks ago. I don't sit on a committee. I said, guys, you know, where are we? I'm nervous. I'm nervous about the ban list. I'm nervous about mail-in ballots. I did hear and even polling stations. I said, you know, we committed last time to do this, and where are we? And the response I got was, well, you know, the notice has gone out now, and because we could have used more polling stations. And we are saving a bit of money in this election because we hired a lady named Carol Leahy, who's a lower cost electoral officer than the previous gentleman who did that. So I said, where are we? And I didn't get a really good answer, and I became very nervous. So as we went into the polling stations on the advanced poll, there were problems there too. I was shocked actually when I offered my card up to the lady there, and she said, you don't need it. She said, oh, you're good. You know. I said, man, but I found out that even in the provincial election, you don't show ID, which I was shocked to find out. But Bobby, on this issue of mail-in ballots, I don't think we got it right this time either, because I know I have a niece living in Nova Scotia. She went there teaching school just recently, and he said, I'd like to put a vote in for you, but I asked for a ballot and I didn't get it. A lot of mistakes were made, Bobby.
Now, what's going to happen to those, say there's 50,000, so the mail-in 50,000 mail-in votes, they don't get votes?
No.
So how legitimate?
Some of them got in. We have a lot of mail-in ballots, I heard already, but I don't know how many. But some, yeah, some are missed.
So now, what happens to those people who have an opportunity to vote, but now do not?
It's time to go with the times
I know.
online.
Pardon me, I'm sorry? Well, that's what the referendum is. Thank you, Joanne. I'll share something else with you also about communication. It came up in Stephenville. Everybody got up, talked about communication or the lack of it. One of the things we're almost ready with is a way to people to get into our council meetings by going into GINU and entering their band number. And then they can be on their computer at home and join the meeting live in real time. So that'll be ready for the first council meeting coming up in November. So that's something that we're working on, other things. So we can do something with this, and you're right. So the way we're planning on doing it is a referendum to say you can phone in your vote.
How much money is put aside for the election?
Yeah, $100,000. We have to save up for 3 years' money, $30-something thousand a year, because we pay for that ourselves. Yeah, I'm hoping, though, this year, against a $100,000 budget, it may come in lower, only because the lady that's doing it is a lower fee than...
But I mean, all the recommendations from the last election, none of it was brought forward.
Some of them was brought forward, particularly with respect to a new way to do an election. But yeah, to my dismay, everything that was proposed, and as I talked about, I said, guys, you know, we've had a committee in place now for a year and a half. You know, don't tell me we haven't got this right again, because there will be complaints. You know, already. I know, Joanne.
So how many more polling stations have you got this year versus what we had before?
Yeah, none.
You've got 9 more.
No, none. Same as last time.
So these people are on a committee a year and a half in doing work on what? They didn't do any changes. So what did they do? They didn't do any work.
I won't say that, but I'll say maybe there weren't enough polling stations and we could have used more.
You could have used more? You know you could have used more.
Yeah, thank you.
Language is not really on the spectrum for most people, on the radar as anything that's important. I think that had we had somebody who was semi-fluent or partially fluent in the language, it would have made negotiations and relationships with Nova Scotia so much better. Yep. Question is, would you commit to having a language person separate from culture under Hollywood? And secondly, would you hire somebody who spoke Mi'kmaq to evaluate the candidates so that the best person for the job was hired?
I think that's a great suggestion. I do know this. There are a couple of people in your community that have been working with Halibu on language, and you guys know who they are. For me, I thought you were the only speaker we had around, Dean, to tell you the truth. But anyway, yeah, this is something we need to do, because there's a tremendous link in Indigenous communities, thank you very much, between language and culture. I had a conversation recently, and we're going to look forward to this or investigate this. Immaculate Heart of Mary School in Corner is a private Catholic school. They're not under government control. Met with me, their chairman of the board, and said we'd like to introduce a third language in Immaculate Heart of Mary, and they said they wanted it to be Mi'kmaq. So we're in the process of trying to develop a program, and yes, we will need a teacher, and we will need a speaker to work full-time in that school to help our people. That's just one initiative.
Will somebody who speaks the language make the decision on who's most qualified for that position?
It sounds like a good suggestion. Thank you. And you know, I know language camps are happening. I think they're in Port-au-Port. I attended one full day of one there last year. Grand Falls this time. Have you had them here? Yeah. Great, great. So these are, and St. George, these are community initiatives that Halibu First Nation, of course, has to be involved in and supporting. But I like the idea of having an educator within our system who can speak the language, and they can go out in our communities and help people trying to get involved in Mi'kmaq. And I do respect that it's not an easy language to learn.
When I was young, I was denied my heritage.
Yep.
French, Micmac, all right? Wasn't allowed to speak, we all know that, in retarded feather, right? Anywhere in this country, where did you see people that to come up with points to prove who they are?
Nowhere. Nowhere. And you know what? I'll tell you this. I hope no one else ever has to do it. But I'll tell you about something that's going to happen, though. I mentioned Daniels earlier in 2016. There was a decision made to bring Métis people and non-status people to status recognition. Let me just share this with you and why government might think this is so important as precedent setting. Do you think for a moment they're going to sign them up, give me your name, Mary, Tom, Joe, Jill, Bid, Fred, Billy Ann, and Mary? Just by giving their name? No. There's a set of rigor going to be put into that process, and I wouldn't doubt it. It was like the Halibu First Nation process. This is why this is so important to government. Okay, so yeah, no one should have been on a point system. When did people ever go into it? It's degrading, you know? And I fought the point system. I'll share something else with you. I don't want to be going on because maybe you won't even believe me. But I'll tell you, I never supported the point system. When Brendan Shepard went around the table, when I said, I'm not supporting the point system, it's wrong. How can people even get in the band based on the point system who don't even live on the mainland? He went around the table. Yeah, others were okay with it. Maybe they didn't understand it. But I never did support the point system because I didn't know how people were going to stay or be in the band because of it. They weren't members of the FNI. I thought their chances were low, and I spoke against it. And I'll just tell you one more thing while I'm here with you. People talk to me about ratification. Ben was there when I told Brendan Shepard. Me and him have been not friends ever since these days, okay? One time we were friends, but we're not anymore. I said to him, and some others with me, said this agreement should be ratified by the people. And they said, no, it doesn't have to. But it says in the document that the agreement should be ratified in the same way as the original agreement was ratified. But anyway, the lawyer and Brendan Shepard and Yes Canada claimed that it didn't need to be ratified. And at the time, the argument was, based on a 2009 meeting of the FNI, the only remaining members of the FNI at that time, it was believed, now Liz, I think you were there, maybe you can help me with this, believe that going forward, it will only be the directors of the FNI will be the actual members anymore. And that's how we were told. Yeah, okay, thank you. And we were told only the members of the FNI would be the directors of the FNI from the Halibu Council. And that's how people were able to do it. And I said, guys, you know, that's not what the document said. But at the end of the day, after, like I told you before, you know, I've been accused of selling people out. No, I was there to give people the chance. And I gave people the chance on self-ID, thousands of them, when me and Ben and others said, the self-ID in the first agreement, there were two supplemental agreements that came to the table. And the first one had everybody self-IDing in the same way that the crowd who fought the Wells and Wells case had to self-identify. So we had thousands of members of Halibu back in the day who were never members of the FNI or related bands, and they were gone. And Annie Randall, in her wisdom, and Hayward Young today, is saying that Brendan Mitchell was one of them people, and that is absolutely untrue. Absolutely untrue. I had no issue self-identifying in this.
I know that Annie, all this kerfuffle about the Annie email, we know it's real. Second of all, I'm going to get to the better part. She didn't call you a savage, and I'm not picking up for Annie.
No, she said I was savage, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I wasn't savage. I don't get savage, but I can get a little bit upset sometimes.
But the problem that people have with that is that it gave the people an understanding that there was more control at the table on that supplemental agreement than the FNI was leading on, or Halibu was leading on as well. So that it was showing that Annie and Frank Caron had the opportunity to mold the supplemental agreement, to go back, to amend, to do all these things. So the problem that people were having with you, I don't think it's so much that people thought that if you weren't the founding member, there's lots of people who weren't founding members, and there's a case to that as well.
What I tell you though, if I wasn't there, and Ben wasn't there, and others who supported what we were saying, the band today, based on self-ID that was included in the first agreement, it'd be 8,000 people smaller than it is right now. Because the plan was to take out the non-FNI members and associated bands, and then the second phase would be to get people on the point system. No one wanted this band to be this big. That's what happened.
In any case, it's the arrogance that people were feeling from Annie and whoever and Fred to be able to mold it the way they want, and then for her to even come back to you and you say this is no good. Not the point. If you said this is no good, I think you could have easily come from the case to say, hey, if this affects me, it affects other people too. I think that way many times. So I think that would have been a case, but instead, the problem that people have with you with this, I can't speak for everybody, is that you called it alleged on Mi'kmaq Manners. You didn't.
I'm sorry, call what?
You said the alleged email on Mi'kmaq Matters on the.
It was alleged at the time, yes.
But you knew that it was real, right? Like we know that the email is real.
And that email was never signed. And what I found surprising on the email, she never ever sent it to you, as far as I know. You weren't even on a mailing list. But she responded to you. She came back and tried to be combative with you or what you said about her lack of indigeneity.
But I worked with her long enough that I can look at an email and I know she wrote it.
Okay.
Okay? There's no doubt. So, but the point that people had with you was that you weren't admitting that it was even real, and people were just trying to get their heads around, did they have this much control?
Did I know it was real?
Yes. That's what I'm asking.
You think?
Yes.
How would I know if it was never signed by anybody? Do you know how many aliases? Do you know how many aliases are on Facebook these days?
No,
Yeah.
no, please.
I can go there.
Send to you.
There's a new one out there now, by the way.
Oh.
Mary Mitchell. Mary Mitchell just came up the other day. And Mary Mitchell is talking like she's a relative of mine, putting me down. I had another one a while ago. John Lasaga.
Yeah,
Remember that one?
I got the same.
They were all foolishness.
Yeah.
But Annie Randall's email,
You knew that.
if I was going to go to court over Annie Randall's email, at that point, yes, it's alleged. I wasn't expecting to have a cross-examination here every day today. At the time that letter came, yes, it was alleged. Because I can send a letter to anybody under some other Facebook place or some other spot and say my name is somebody else, okay?
That's something to say
Yeah.
to court, that's not something to say to us.
Yeah, but I am going to court, by the way, on that, on February 24th, over that email. And Eric Tucker is bringing it forward, filing a lawsuit against me. I can't wait, actually. I really can't wait, because there's so much stuff going to come out in court when I go there. This election is about moving forward. It's about moving forward together. We hear a lot about healing and reconciliation in Canada, but I've come to recognize that we have our own healing and reconciliation to do, and we need to do it together. So Brendan Mitchell is here in your community to tell you that I'm here to support your community like I always have. And we'll have our differences of opinion, but I'm the right person to work with you going forward and help you bring this community to where it can be, and I know it can. You're living in a beautiful place, and Big Pond is an incredible development. The powwow is a nice place to be. And next summer, hopefully, we'll have a big crowd back again with a greater sense of unity and family and community. I'm here for you, and I always will be. So I also respectfully ask that on voting day, give Brendan Mitchell an opportunity to work with you, because I'm the right person to work with you as Chief of Hallowell First Nation. Thank you very much. Thank you.